I'm Clay Coomer, and this is the Travel Insights Podcast. Once upon a time, I developed consumer-based travel marketing plans to generate awareness, grow website traffic, and increase e-commerce revenue. I succeeded at this for multiple travel brands, even helping nearly double consumer-sourced revenue at one of them over the course of 5 years. This podcast is part one of a two-part series and my way to pass the baton to the next generation of consumer travel marketers to steal my data-packed playbook. Follow along to make an immediate impact on your consumer travel marketing efforts, all coming up next on the Travel Insights Podcast. The Travel Insights Podcast is powered by Battleface. Battleface has cracked the partnership code by offering one-of-a-kind products uniquely designed for how partners, travelers see the world, all backed by 24/7, 365 global assistance services. It's the perfect combination of winning an attachment and enhancing lifetime value. Battleface, built for today's travelers and building for tomorrow's. Welcome, fellow travelers. Clay Coomer here, host of the Travel Insights Podcast, powered by Battleface. And in this part one of a two-part series, we are going to go into consumer travel marketing. And in this first segment, we are going to start with where to begin. And where I like to begin is ensuring you have the right tools to do the job effectively. And I recognize that there are a ton of different tools out there, and they're changing very frequently with the emergence of generative AI. But here are the ones that I personally relied on when consumer travel marketing was all that I did. First is SEMrush. It's a common one that I believe most marketers know about, and at a cost of around $200 to $300 per month, I would say that it is well worth it if used properly. Next is my favorite, Canva, and I still use Canva to this day, but if you're a DIY marketer and you're on a shoestring budget, this is the best investment you'll make, because you're definitely going to want to get the pro version, and it is very inexpensive. GA4, which most marketers are familiar with GA4 and are likely as frustrated as me as we switched from Universal Analytics to GA4, but here we are. And assuming this is your web analytics tool of choice, just make sure that it's set up properly. And if it's not, then you're going to want to remedy that quickly. ChatGPT, obvious choice, super powerful generative AI. Just got to know how to write the right prompts. Blaze AI is a new one that I have found recently. It's super powerful AI content, the platform, and it helps with amping up your content production in general with a variety of different options to choose from. I found it to be a really reliable source, especially if you're writing articles or blogs or resource pages, things of that nature. And lastly, everyone's favorite, especially if you're in marketing, is Microsoft Excel. Or if you're a Google person, Google Sheets. But get comfortable spending a lot of time in spreadsheets. The all in, everything I just mentioned will probably cost about $5,000 or less for a year. And truly, it's worth every penny if used effectively. So that's segment one on where to begin. You got to start with the right tools. But coming up next, we're going to talk about segment 2. I'll be back in just a couple seconds to get into the next topic, which is looking back before you look forward. Welcome back. Clay Coomer here, host of the Travel Insights podcast powered by Battleface. This is the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass 2-part series. We are on part 1 of 2. And in this segment titled Looking Back Before You Look Forward, before you spend another dime on demand generation tactics or paid media, you're going to need to take some time to immerse yourself in historical performance metrics. If your GA4 is set up and you have historical web metrics in GA4, I recommend spending a good amount of time there. We'll get into that more in just a little bit. But first, take a deep dive into your paid search historical metrics. Assuming you've been spending in paid search, whether it's in Google Ads or if it's in Microsoft Ads, be sure to earmark keywords and or different ad copy or landing pages that have formed well and plan for a reprisal later using similar type of tactics. Like my wife always says, the best indicator of future performance is past performance. So again, use that to your advantage. If you have historical metrics on social media advertising like Meta or Facebook and Instagram or TikTok or wherever else, do the same thing. Do the same thing there and look at different campaigns that performed well, different ad copy or different ad styles, whether it was single image or carousel or video. Really focus in on the historical metrics there and what you saw work well and what didn't. Next is spending a good amount of time in Google Search Console, right? So if you have a setup of GA4 in Google Ads, you likely also have some historical data in Google Search Console that you can use to your advantage to understand different types of trends and ranking for brand and non-branded terms. But also, too, it gives you a good sense as to the overall health of your website, which goes hand in hand with all these different types of tactics for building an effective consumer travel marketing playbook. Got to make sure your website's healthy. As I mentioned, GA4, spend time looking back on web analytics and using GA4 or whatever analytics platform you use to evaluate page performance. And again, if you're starting from scratch here in your travel marketing journey for consumers, I would say, again, if you don't have this historical data, then you're going to need to spend a lot of time with what we're going to talk about in segment 3, which is identifying your key audience segments and your ideal customer profiles that we'll get into later. And in GA4, if you have e-commerce tracking enabled and you're able to see various purchase path metrics from that experience, spend some time with abandonment context. This will help you identify if you have a leak in the bucket somewhere in those steps. This has been a really effective approach for me personally at companies that I've helped grow their consumer channel. When I've identified key steps in the purchase path that have issues, I can then verify that with different other metrics as well, and tie that into what we're seeing in Google Search Console or Google Lighthouse and seeing if there is any critical issues with load times and speed times and that sort of thing. And I can take all that information back to engineers and programmers and UX UI designers to help mitigate those issues to stop the leak from happening. It's amazing how much money marketers lose by having abandonment issues in the checkout process. So that's something that you should definitely keep an eye on. And of course, remember to buy SEMrush. Again, I know there's a lot of other platforms out there that are similar, but SEMrush to me has been a reliable and inexpensive tool, not just for content, SEO, and search engine marketing in general, but also too with a lot of competitor insights and analysis that you can glean from it. But you can set up a specific project for your website, and you can spend time looking into backlinks and keyword ranking analysis with opportunity scoring to see where time should be spent. And that time that you can spend is either in developing new content for keywords and or refreshing, optimizing existing pages. Again, this assumes you have existing travel content on your site. But I'd say too, just to conclude segment 2 here, spend a minimum of 2 weeks immersing yourself in this information. And be sure to document everything you see, take really good notes, keep everything in one place. I promise you it will be well worth your time as you proceed on to the next step, which we will get to in just a couple seconds. Stay tuned. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're going to get into segment 3 and zeroing in on your target audiences and your ideal customer profiles. Welcome back. Clay Coomer here, host of the Travel Insights podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. So again, we're going to get into segment 3 here, which is the last segment of the part 1 of this 2-part series in Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass. So we're going to zero in on your target audiences and ideal customer profiles. And again, I apologize. There is more data to analyze here, but you do get to step out of the analysis a little bit and get more into the creative. But I do believe that this is likely the most crucial step in the planning process. And it's understanding who you're marketing to, for one, but also who you're marketing to maximize efficiency and the likelihood of conversion. With anything in marketing, whether it's consumer travel marketing or elsewhere, having those ideal customer profiles established on who you want to reach out to and who your product makes the most sense for, and understanding that from a consumer perspective, a lot of this is all about timing. Right time, right place, right message, right experience. And this can be a challenging step, especially if, again, your budgets and resources are thin. If you can't rely on analysts to provide insights, or you don't have the funds to invest in focus groups to dial in on messaging concepts, you must turn to the data, and the data that is available to you either from your company or what you can source that is available to you on the internet. But for me personally, one of the most impactful things that I came across that helped me for this particular topic came from a book that was written by a guy named Donald Miller. And this book is called Building a Story Brand. If you've heard of this book or if you've read this book, you may have an opinion on it. My opinion is personally favorable, and it has made an impact in how I view building out customer profiles. But in essence, Donald Miller, he designed a 7-part framework that is applicable to any marketer working to grow a brand or build an existing brand. And I think that the main takeaway that I got out of it, just in summary, is essentially this. You, the brand, are not the hero in your customer story. As much as you want to be, you want to be that brand that comes in to save the day and, be that hero. You are not. You are not the hero in your customer story. Your customer is the hero in their own unique story. So this notion that the customer is the hero and is on their own journey, and you, the brand, you must identify different villains in their story or problems that they face in their story, their journey, and how you can act as a guide to give them a plan to succeed in overcoming the problem. To summarize here, the steps in simple terms kind of look like this. There's a character, which is, again, your ideal customer profile or your ideal customer, and understanding what it is they want. But they also have a problem or problems, right? Those problems could be external, internal, or even philosophical. So first, you need to identify what it is they want and what problems they face. So they meet a guide, which is you, who understands their problem with empathy and authority and expertise on this topic. And the guide, you, the brand, gives them a plan that will then call them to action. And this plan that calls them to action, it results in success and it helps them avoid failure. It seems basic, but I promise it is an effective exercise to spend time on and truthfully take seriously as you progress in not just building the brand, but executing your consumer travel marketing plan, not to the masses, but to specifically who has a problem that you can help solve. All right, so let's take a quick break and we will be back to conclude part 1, and I will tell you what's in store for part 2 of the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass coming up next on the Travel Insights podcast. The Travel Insights podcast is powered by Battleface. Battleface started in the UK market in 2016, offering travel protection to journalists covering news stories in conflict zone areas. What began as one product in one country has expanded to a global, multi-regional company on a mission to power the travel insurance industry. Battleface, built for today's travelers and building for tomorrow's. Welcome back, and we are going to just quickly summarize part 1 here, and then I'll tee up part 2 of this series. And if there was anything that you should take away from part 1 of this series, it is this, and it is to buy SEMrush and Canva, get subscriptions for both of those platforms. They will be your best friend, especially if you have a thin budget and are low on resources. Get comfortable using AI as part of your daily process, and it will inevitably help speed things along and help generate actually good ideas. So get comfortable with it, and it's not going anywhere. Spend a lot of time looking at historical data, depending on what you have available. If you do have this data available, start with GA4, Google Search Console, previous advertising campaigns, and if you do have it, existing customer data. If you have any of that aligns with your travel audience segments, spend a good amount of time researching it and understanding it. It will help you in the long run. Get familiar with the story brand framework, as we just talked about in the 7-part framework. read the book if you can, but if you can't really understand that 7-step process, it will help you immensely as you are thinking about the problems that your customers have and the solutions that your brand can offer as a guide to help them succeed. And start putting together a couple of character stories using that framework. So using the information that you have, build out those stories that represent your ideal customer profiles. And coming up in part 2, we're going to continue along in this consumer travel marketing journey together, and we're going to bring everything together, covering topics like identifying the 4 stages of travel, building an expense plan for paid media around the seasonality of travel aligned to those 4 stages, steps that you can take to create an effective content calendar using an evergreen plan as well as a quarterly campaign structure, and my favorite, how to use a probability of conversion matrix to maximize efficiency. Your finance department will thank you. But trust the process. I promise I will not lead you astray here, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. I am Clay Coomer, head of marketing at Battleface and the host of the Travel Insights podcast. And I will see you next time for part 2 of the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass series. Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of the Consumer Travel Marketing Masterclass series on the Travel Insights podcast, powered by Battleface. This episode was written, edited, produced, and hosted by me, Clay Coomer. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the Travel Insights by Battleface podcast, available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you have an insights idea for the show, feel free to send me an email at clay@battleface.com. Would love to hear from you. And we'll see you again next time on the Travel Insights podcast, powered by Battleface.